Captain Mara Ivers stepped off the shuttle into the Dragon Bastion's receiving bay, the air thick with the metallic tang of recycled oxygen and something sharper, ozone from the plasma shields humming along the walls. Her boots echoed on the grated floor, each step a reminder of the ground she'd lost on the front lines. The bastion was a fortress carved into an asteroid's heart, its corridors lit by harsh blue strips that cast long shadows. Outside, the void pressed in, but here, the weight of the war felt heavier. She'd been pulled from the orbital skirmishes 3 weeks ago, after her last improvisation saved a carrier from Ixir boarding parties, sacrificed 2 squads to do it. The commendation came with this assignment: command the liaison unit. Uneasy alliances with dragons. Humanity's desperate reach for claws and fire against the Xir Dominion's endless swarms. A junior officer snapped to attention as she entered the command deck. "Captain Ivers, welcome. Admiral Tan is expecting you." Mara nodded, her jaw tight. The deck buzzed with activity, techs monitoring feeds from the front, where Xir victories piled up like wreckage. Another colony glassed, fleets scattered. She followed the officer through a blast door to a briefing room, its viewport showing the asteroid's scarred surface, dotted with docking clamps for dragon haulers. Admiral K. Tan stood at the hollow table, her uniform crisp despite the shadows under her eyes. She was a statue of control, hair pulled back severe, the lines on her face etched by losses Mara could only guess at. "Ivers, good. Sit." Mara took the chair. The holotable flickering to life with star maps. Red icons bloomed across human space. Gagzir advances, relentless. "Status. Dire," Kay said flatly. "The Dominion's seers are predicting our moves before we make them. We've lost 3 systems in the last month. Conventional forces can't hold." She tapped the table, zooming to a contract glyph, pulsing in ancient script. "This is our last gambit. A blood-bound pact with Virkal, the Black Star, the Dragon King." Mara's gut twisted. She'd read the files. Virkal, a void dragon who'd raised fleets for the highest bidder, his hide black as event horizons, wings spanning kilometers in war form. Majestic terror, the legends called him. He signed. Reluctantly. "The contract demands he fight for us against the Ixir, but dragons like him don't leash easily. He requires an anchor, a compatible human to stabilize his biofield during deployment. Without it, he'll turn on us as quick as the enemy." Mara leaned forward, scanning the data. "And we have one." Kay's eyes hardened. "We're introducing her now. Lyra Cade, refugee, 19, only survivor from the Epsilon burnings. Her neuroempathic readings are anomalous. Lesser dragons went dormant around her in tests, instead of shredding the handlers." The door hissed open, and a young woman entered, escorted by 2 Marines. Lyra was slight, her dark hair cropped short, eyes wide but not vacant. She wore a standard jumpsuit, hands clasped tight as if holding herself together. Mara saw the tremor in her fingers, the way she scanned the room like it might collapse. "Ms. Cade," Kay said, gesturing her forward. "This is Captain Ivers, your new commanding officer." Lyra nodded, voice soft but steady. I want to help. Last time on Epsilon, I couldn't save anyone. But if this works..." She trailed off, clinging to the words like a lifeline. Mara noted the desperation there. Touch-hungry, the psych eval had said. A girl who'd lost everything, now betting on monsters to protect what was left. "Proximity tests with juveniles showed her vitals sinking," Kay continued. "No panic response. She's the only candidate left breathing." Mara studied Lyra, weighing the risk. The girl met her gaze, unflinching despite the fear flickering in her eyes. Motive clear, redemption, or at least purpose. Flaw, that raw need for connection, which could snap under pressure. We'll proceed to first contact. Controlled environment. The containment cavern was a vast chamber deep in the bastion, walls reinforced with neutronium plating and energy webs. Mara stood on the observation gantry, Lyra at her side in a harness linked to biomonitors. Below, the weapon teams fanned out, Marines with railguns and plasma lances, faces pale under their helmets. The air hummed with tension, the cavern's lights dimmed to simulate void conditions. "Summon him," Mara ordered into her comm. A low rumble built, vibrating through the deck. The central pit irised open and Virkal manifested. Not teleported, dragons didn't bend space like that. He uncoiled from some rift in reality, his war form filling the space like a storm given scales. Black hide gleamed under the lights, edges shimmering with internalized heat. Wings folded against his flanks, vast enough to eclipse stars. His eyes burned amber, locking on the humans with predatory focus. The air thickened, his biofield pressing like a gravitational wave, lethal hostility radiating in waves that made the Marines' suits whine in protest. "Perimeter hold," Mara barked, but Virkal lunged, a blur of muscle and fang. His roar shattered eardrums, the shockwave crumpling a weapon crate. A Marine fired instinctively, the rail slug glancing off his scales in a spray of sparks. Virkal's tail whipped, sending the man flying into the wall with a wet crunch. Alarms blared, aggression metrics spiking red across Mara's HUD. "Suppressors!" she shouted. The teams unleashed a barrage, energy bolts stitching the air. Virkal twisted mid-charge, flames erupting from his maw to melt a lance barrel. He was awe-inspiring. A force of cosmic wrath, but terrifying. Every movement a promise of annihilation. Mara gripped the rail, heart pounding. This was the Alliance, a beast who'd incinerate them all if the anchor failed. Lyra gasped beside her, monitors beeping wildly. "He's hurting them." "Protocol," Mara snapped, but Lyra was already moving, unhooking her harness against every rule. "Stop." Too late. Lyra bolted down the access ramp, weaving through the chaos as Virkal barreled toward the lines. Marines shouted, but she didn't falter, her face set in that stubborn resolve. Virkal's head swung, eyes narrowing on the girl charging straight at him. He reared, claws gouging the floor, killing aura flaring brighter, enough to induce seizures in the unshielded. Lyra reached him as he charged, leaping the last meters to slam her palms against his foreleg scales. The impact should have pulped her. Instead, Virkal froze. His roar cut off mid-breath, massive frame locking in place. The biofield collapsed, the oppressive weight lifting like a tide receding. He loomed over her, breath hot enough to singe her hair, but he didn't strike. Those amber eyes widened, pupils dilating in what Mara could only read as stunned stillness. The cavern fell silent save for the hiss of cooling metal and labored breaths. Lyra didn't pull away, her hands splayed on the unyielding black scales, tears streaking her face. "It's okay," she whispered, voice trembling but fierce. "We need you. I need you not to be alone in this." Mara's console lit up, systems recording it all. Aggression metrics plummeted from lethal to baseline in seconds. A synchronization spike unprecedented, Lyra's vitals mirroring Virkal's, heart rates aligning, neural patterns entwining like roots. The dragon's head lowered slowly, nostrils flaring as he inhaled her scent. No snap of jaws, no blaze of fire, just stillness, awe-inspiring in its impossibility. "Stand down," Mara ordered, voice rough. The teams complied, weapons lowering. Virkal's gaze shifted to her, then back to Lyra, a low rumble vibrating through the floor. Not threat, but something deeper, uncharted. Back in the briefing room, Katon paced, holoscreens replaying the encounter. Against protocol, Ivers, she could have been vaporized. But she wasn't, Mara countered, arms crossed. Lyra sat nearby, wrapped in a blanket, staring at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. The girl looked drained, but alive. Changed. Maybe with that quiet fire in her eyes. Kay stopped, fixing Mara with a stare. "The pact holds because of her. Formalize it. Lyra Cade is Virkal's sole handler. Train her, integrate her. If this bond breaks, or if she falters, we abandon the Dragon Alliance. No second chances. The Kasiar won't wait." Mara nodded, the weight settling heavier. Victory at any cost, she reminded herself. But as Lyra met her gaze, clinging to this fragile thread of protection, Mara felt the first crack in her certainty. What if the cost was turning a girl into a leash for a monster? Mara watched the holoscreens flicker in the dim command pod. her fingers tracing the regiment's parameters like scars on old wounds. The air hummed with the low throb of the carrier's engines, a constant reminder that nothing here was still. Lyra's sessions with Virkal had to evolve, pairing her fragile empathy with the dragon's raw fury against simulated fleet assaults. No more gentle introductions. This was war prep, brutal and unyielding. Mara keyed in the schedule. Daily contacts synced to full-scale drills, where Virkal's plasma breath would sync with human squadrons under her command. Stress would forge the link or break it. She didn't care which, as long as it held when the Exoerror came calling. The first session hit like a gut punch. Mara stood at the observation deck, separated by reinforced void glass from the containment bay. Virkal coiled in the chamber's heart, his obsidian scales drinking the artificial light. Wings folded like storm clouds. The Dragon King was a mountain of lethal grace, each breath a rumble that vibrated through the deck plating. Lyra entered alone as always, her steps hesitant but deliberate, the white isolation suit clinging to her slight frame. No weapons, no barriers, just her. Virkal's eyes snapped open, golden slits narrowing. He tested her immediately, as Mara had anticipated. A flare of heat bloomed from his maw, the air shimmering as temperatures spiked to killing levels. Lyra froze but didn't retreat. She reached out, palm forward, murmuring something lost to the vents. The dragon lunged, jaws parting in a mock snap that brought his fangs within inches of her shoulder. The proximity burned. Mara saw the girl's suit blacken at the edges, the acrid scent of melting polymer seeping through the seals. Yet Lyra held, her hand brushing his scaled snout. The heat ebbed just a fraction, Virkal's growl softening to a puzzled rumble. He pulled back, circling her slowly, testing again. Another flare, another snap. Each time her touch lingered unwavering, and each time the dragon's aggression dulled like embers under rain. From the shadows of his mind, Virkal felt the intrusion as a strange itch, not pain but persistence. This human fledgling with her soft skin and unblinking eyes defied the cosmos's cold logic. He had shattered worlds, reduced fleets to ash, yet her nearness stirred something primal, a dampening of the void's endless hunger. It infuriated him. He snapped closer, heat licking her face, but she didn't flinch. Her biofield, that anomalous warmth, seeped into his scales, cooling the fire in his veins. For the first time, destruction felt distant. Mara turned away from the glass, her jaw tight. Success, but at what cost? To keep this viable, she'd started siphoning resources quietly, rerouting protein synths from the mess halls, pulling medtechs from routine patrols, even cycling extra power from the auxiliary reactors to stabilize Virkal's containment field. Lyra needed monitoring. The dragon's proximity drained her, left her trembling with aftershocks. The humans suffered for it. Whispers spread through the lower decks, rations thinning, injuries untreated, lights flickering during blackouts. A squad leader cornered her in the corridor one shift, face gaunt under the harsh strips. "We're bleeding for your pet project, Ivers. Those scales better bleed your blood soon." Mara met his glare, said nothing. Resentment festered like an open wound, but she pushed on. Victory demanded it. The live fire drill came on the third cycle. A simulated breach over a debris field mimicking Haven Gate's outer markers. Mara orchestrated from the bridge, her voice steady over the comms. Virkal launched from the bay, a black comet streaking into the void, Lyra's voice piping through the link to guide his targeting. Human strike wings flanked him, sleek fighters from the 7th Wing, call signs barking in Mara's ear. "Sink on my mark," she ordered. "Dragon lead takes point. You hold the flanks." The glitch hit mid-maneuver. Alarms blared as the reactor stuttered, power diverting to compensate for an overload in the containment relays. Mara's own redirects biting back. Virkal's breath weapon charged, plasma building in his throat, but the feed starved. He roared, a sound that shook the hull, twisting in the black. His wings beat furiously, scattering simulated debris. But the energy faltered. The Exir mock targets, drone swarms, closed in, their phantom lasers painting the screens red. Seventh wing, maintain position. Mara's command cut through the static, her knuckles white on the console. Bait them, buy time for refire. The pilots acknowledged, voices clipped. No hesitation, just the grim resolve of soldiers who'd signed for this. They dove into the kill zone, engines flaring as they drew the drone's fire. Lyra's voice rose in the link, urgent and soothing, her empathy threading through the dragon's rage. Easy, Virkal. Breathe with me. Hold it. Seconds stretched into eternity. Virkal's chest heaved, the delayed plasma surging at last. A cataclysmic torrent that lit the void like a newborn star. It vaporized the drones, but the strike wing was caught in the backwash. Fighters crumpled, hulls blooming into silent fireballs. Mara watched the icons wink out one by one. Tactical success. The simulation logged as a win, the dragon's output peaking at 112% nominal. But the cost. Grief hit her like shrapnel that night in the dim of her quarters. Families flooded the comms, hollow messages from the core worlds, faces twisted in accusation. She was 22, one mother sobbed, clutching a faded photo. You used her as bait. Mara deleted them one after another, but the words burrowed. She'd ordered it, justified it. The dead were fuel for the machine, just like the rations she'd stolen. Sleep came in fragments, haunted by the wing's last transmissions. For the gate, for humanity. Lyra found her the next morning in the prep bay, eyes red-rimmed but fierce. The girl had overheard the family's echoes through the ship's gossip nets. "This is on me too," Lyra said, voice cracking as she strapped into her suit. "I calmed him. I made it happen." Guilt warred in her face, but she straightened, jaw set. "We can't stop. If we do, more die anyway." Mara nodded, throat tight, but inside, doubt gnawed. Lyra's compassion was a weapon now, sharpening with every loss. In the session that followed, Lyra clung harder, her arms wrapping around Virkal's forelimb as if anchoring herself to his heat. The dragon felt it, the sorrow bleeding through, a human ache that mirrored his own ancient voids. He didn't flare this time, just lowered his head, letting her press against him. The bond deepened, unwelcome but undeniable, her tears evaporating on his scales. Admiral Katan summoned Mara to the flagship's war room 2 cycles later, the air thick with recycled ozone and the Admiral's unyielding stare. Kay paced before the strategic holomap, Haven Gate pulsing red in the display, a besieged choke point where our fleets hammered humanity's last supply line. "The drill proves it," Kay said, her voice like grinding gears. "Dragon-linked ops turned the tide. Your girls got him leashed." She tapped the map, zooming on the gate's fractured orbitals. "Prep them. Deployment orders are en route. We hit the Exire there or we lose the frontier." Mara absorbed the words, her mind already mapping vectors, risks. But as she returned to the carrier, an encrypted packet pinged her secure terminal. Classified notices stamped with command's seal. She cracked it open, breath catching. Lyra Cade, reclassified. No longer civilian. Strategic asset. Effective immediately. No right to refuse deployment. No appeal. Consent waived for operational necessity. Mara's hands trembled on the controls. The girl who'd walked into the dragon's jaws out of quiet desperation was now property, chattel for the war machine. And Mara, who'd built this, held the leash that would drag her into the fire. Mara gripped the shuttle's harness as it shuddered through the void, the Ashoka's silhouette growing larger against the starfield. Her mind churned, the encrypted packet's words burning like shrapnel in her thoughts. Lyra Cade. Strategic asset. Consent waived. The girl beside her stared out the viewport, fingers twisting in her lap, while Virkal loomed in the cargo bay beyond the bulkhead, a coiled shadow of scales and restrained fury, his breath fogging the reinforced glass that separated them. The Dragon King's eyes, molten amber slits, flicked toward her occasionally, as if sensing the fracture in her resolve. "They're pulling the gate shut," Mara said, voice steady despite the knot in her gut. Haven Gate was the last thread for the colonies, a wormhole corridor funneling refugees from the Izir's advance. If it collapsed, millions would burn in the fallout. We punch through, buy them time. Virkal leads the breach. Lyra nodded, her face pale under the cabin lights, but her hand reached instinctively toward the intercom panel. The bond had formed in fragments over weeks, her touch easing the dragon's primal rage, turning raw power into something precise, allied. Mara had orchestrated it, threading Lyra's anomalous empathy through neural links and biomonitors. Now it was their edge against the Exir's endless swarms. The shuttle docked with a metallic groan, mag clamps locking into the Ashoka's flank. Crew techs swarmed the bay, hauling gear and avoiding Virkal's gaze. The dragon uncoiled as the barriers dropped, his form eclipsing the light, wings folded like armored sails, claws scraping grooves into the deck plating. He was a weapon forged in stellar fires, 20 meters of void black scales that absorbed radar and spat plasma. Humans whispered of him as the Black Star, the Reaper who'd cracked alien hulls like eggshells. But up close, his presence pressed like gravity, awe twisting into terror. Mara unstrapped, gesturing Lyra forward. "Stay close, the storm's building." Reports from the gate painted a nightmare, Exire bio waves rippling through comms, fraying minds before weapons even fired. They moved to the command deck, Virkal's tail lashing a path through the corridors. Alarms blared as the carrier accelerated, engines thrumming towards the gate's maw, a shimmering rift ringed by debris and flickering shields. Mara slid into her station, screens blooming with tactical overlays. Fleets clashed in the distance, human corvettes weaving through wire tendril ships, those organic behemoths pulsing with bioluminescent veins. Then it hit. A psychic wave slammed into the Ashoka like a hammer, not from weapons but from the Zyre's core. Zal-Un's doing, she knew. The Warseer wielded terror as a scalpel, broadcasting visions of unraveling flesh, loved ones dissolving in acid voids. Crews faltered across the fleet, pilots veered into friendly fire, gunners froze mid-burst. On Mara's deck, a lieutenant clawed at his console, screaming about shadows eating his bones. Coordination shattered. Virkal, prepped at the launch bay, roared in frustration, his plasma vents flaring hot enough to warp the air. "Link up," Mara barked into her mic, overriding the chaos. "Lyra, on him now. Physical contact. Hold through it." Lyra stumbled forward, the wave hitting her too. Her eyes widened, breath hitching as phantom pains clawed her nerves. Ghosts of burned worlds, screams echoing in her skull. But she pressed on, reaching the bay where Virkal thrashed against his restraints. The dragon's head snapped toward her, jaws parting in a snarl that shook the bulkheads. His biofield raged, a storm of instinctual fury amplified by the Exware assault. She didn't flinch. Her hand extended, palm open, and touched his scaled flank. The contact sparked, neural feedback looping through her implants, her empathy threading into his primal core. Virkal stilled, a tremor running through his massive frame. The roar died to a rumble, his eyes narrowing on her fragile form. Mara watched the vitals spike on her secondary screen, Lyra's heart rate climbing, cortisol flooding her system. The girl's body wasn't built for this. Neuroempathic resonance pulled double duty, shielding not just the dragon but bleeding out to dampen the wave for nearby crews. Officers on deck blinked, shaking off the haze, fingers returning to controls. But Lyra swayed, sweat beading on her forehead, the strain etching lines into her young face. "Steady," Mara murmured over the private channel. "You're anchoring him, gates holding because of you." Virkal launched then, bay doors irising open to the void. He was a streak of night, wings unfurling as he hurtled toward the enemy line. The XIR capital ships loomed, bulbous horrors laced with spines, their bio-waves pulsing stronger. Mara vectored the fleet's support fire, her commands cutting through the lingering fog. Virkal dove, plasma breath igniting in a coronal arc, hulls vaporized under the onslaught, Xir vessels blooming into fireballs that lit the gate's edge. Debris fields erupted, stabilizing the corridor just as the last evac shuttles funneled through. But the run's arc was wide, the dragon's power unforgiving. Mara saw it unfold on the scopes. A convoy of civilian transports, delayed by engine failures, caught in the blast radius. They were specks against the maelstrom, but the thermal blooms told the story, hulls melting, life signs winking out, hundreds, maybe thousands, incinerated in the crossfire. Lyra gasped, her hand jerking back from Virkal's side as the feedback hit her. The shared sense flooded her, the dragon's savage joy in the kill, unfiltered destruction reveling in the flames. She recoiled, tears streaking her face, the bond fraying. Virkal twisted mid-void, slipping the tether, his form wheeling back toward the wreckage with predatory glee. He banked, vents glowing, ready to chase the fleeing Zir remnants into oblivion. Protocol be damned. Mara's pulse hammered. Sever the link. Cut power to Lyra's implants. Let the dragon rampage uncontrolled. It might end the immediate threat, but the gate would fall without precision. Or deepen it, force the girl to hold, burn through her limits to reel him in. Thousands were already through, safe because of this. Lyra's life for theirs. Double the med feed, Mara ordered the Baytex, her voice iron. Shunt everything, nanites, stims, oxygen enrich. Lyra, reassert, now, or we lose it all. Lyra choked on a sob, the horror of charred transports mirroring in her eyes. But abandonment's shadow loomed larger. Losing the dragon meant losing her place, her purpose in this madness. She lunged forward, both hands slamming against Virkal's scales, the contact searing through her nerves. Virkal bucked once, then stabilized, the bond snapping taut. He wheeled away from the debris, plasma cooling as he reformed on the Ashoka's wing, guarding the gate's flank. Alarms spiked on Mara's console, Lyra's vitals crashing, organ stress, liver enzymes spiking, neural pathways fraying from overload. The girl slumped against the dragon's side, breath ragged but held. The cost etched in every readout, damage that might scar her for life, traded for the corridor's survival. Far across the void, in the Exire Command Nexus, a throbbing chamber of neural webs and sear pools, Zaloon recoiled from the vision feed. His tendrils quivered, parsing the improbable. A human female, frail and clinging, entwined with the Black Star amid pyres of his own ships. The projections shifted, futures branching like fractured crystal. This bond defied patterns, empathy weaponized, dragons leashed by touch. Remove the girl and the alliance fractures, dragons unbound would turn on their handlers. He marked her, Priority Alpha. Probes dispatched, shadows stirring in the gate's wake. The Ashoka pulled back as the gate sealed behind the final waves. Zir forces recoiling from the dragon's fury. Mara exhaled, the deck settling into exhausted quiet. She left the command post, legs heavy, weaving through medbays where crews nursed psychic burns. Lyra was in isolation now, hooked to drips and monitors. Virkal coiled outside like a sentinel. Mara reached her quarters, the door hissing shut. Her terminal blinked, another encrypted packet, this one flagged urgent from command. Admiral Kaitan's seal. She opened it, the draft directive unfolding in stark text. Subject Lyra Cade. Post-deployment protocol, full sedation. Neural suppressants administered between activations. Asset optimization. Minimize psychological drift. Ensure compliance. No personnel access without clearance. The girl reduced to a warhead. Dormant until needed. Human cost abstracted into efficiency metrics. Mara's fists clenched, the weight of her choices crashing down. She'd built this chain, link by link, Lyra's tentative trust, Virkal's reluctant leash, the fragile alliance holding back the XYR tide. Now, in the dim glow of the command deck's holoscreens, Admiral Kaitan's voice cut through like a plasma blade. We can't afford variables, Mara. The girl's bond is our edge, but it's erratic. Sedation protocols ensure compliance. She'll be awake for the dragon's needs, but her impulses? Locked down. Mara leaned forward, her scarred knuckles whitening against the console. The Admiral's office reeked of recycled air and stale synth coffee, a far cry from the front lines where decisions came bloody and immediate. Sedation isn't control, Admiral. It's erasure. Lyra's not a drone. Her empathy is what keeps Virkal from turning on us. Blunt that, and we lose the only thing making him fight for us instead of with the Xir. Kay's eyes, sharp as targeting reticles, didn't waver. She'd lost her family to the first Zir swarm, and it showed in the iron lines of her face. Control wasn't just strategy for her, it was survival, the one thing she could still grip. Your programs yielded results, Ivers. Bastion holds because of it, but leaks from the psych evals say the girl's cracking, nightmares, withdrawal. If she hesitates in the field, Virkal rampages, and we lose a sector. Sign the order. Reliability over sentiment. Mara's jaw tightened. She thought of the orbital burns, the screams echoing in her helmet as she called in strikes that saved fleets, but doomed platoons. Victory justified costs, she'd told herself then. But this? Drugging a kid to weaponize her heart? It's not sentiment, it's tactics. Her agency's what binds him. Take it, and the bond phrase. Overruled. Kay's finger tapped the tablet, the protocol scrolling into view. Neural suppressants, dosed to dull free will without severing the empathic link. Future ops would run Lyra like a script, touch the dragon, soothe the beast, no deviations. Sign or I reassign you to latrine duty on the outer rims. The stylus felt like lead in Mara's hand. She scrawled her name, the digital ink sealing Lyra's cage. As she left, the Admiral's words lingered. We're at war, Mara. Humanity first. The sedation chamber hummed with sterile menace, its walls lined with containment fields pulsing blue to monitor Virkal's distant thrashings in the bastion core. Lyra lay strapped to the med slab, her dark hair fanned out like spilled ink, eyes fluttering under the initial drip. Mara stood at the observation pane, arms crossed, watching the vital readouts spike. Cycle initiating, the tech murmured, adjusting the IV. Low dose first, should sink her biofield without full blackout. Mara nodded, but her gut twisted. Lyra had come to her weeks ago, a refugee, wide-eyed and clinging, her strange affinity for dragons turning heads in the psych wards. Now this. The first tremors hit Virkal's chamber feeds almost immediately, his massive form coiling in the void, scales like blackened obsidian scraping against reinforced alloy. Alarms blared as his biofield lashed out, a psychic storm cracking the outer containment grids. Sparks flew from the consoles, the air thickening with ozone. Fields at 60%, the tech shouted. He's reacting to the dampener. It's like he's fighting the bond itself. Mara's mind raced. A bastion breach meant Virkal loose in the station, his jaws unmaking bulkheads and crew alike. The dragon was majestic in his terror, a living eclipse with wings that could shroud stars but unchained. He'd burn them all, contract or no. The alternative clawed at her, deepen the sedation, bind Lyra tighter to him chemically, make her a puppet conduit. Override to full dose, Mara barked, slamming the authorization key. Flood it, now. The tech hesitated, then complied. Lyra's monitors flatlined into a dull rhythm, her awareness blunted to echoes. The dragon's agitation peaked, a roar vibrating through the deck plates, shaking Mara's boots, then ebbed. Virkal uncoiled, his massive head dipping toward the link chamber where Lyra's field now pulsed steady, artificial. The field stabilized at 80%. Crisis averted, but as the cycle ended and Lyra stirred, her eyes opened glassy, unfocused. She tugged weakly at the restraints, voice a rasp. Mara, it hurts inside, like he's far away. Why'd you? Mara knelt beside her, forcing a steady gaze. To keep you safe, to keep us all safe. But Lyra's hand slipped from hers, curling inward, the betrayal etching lines on her young face. Trust, once a fragile bridge, now cracked like the containment fields. Word spread through the bastion like coolant from a ruptured line. Whispers in the mess halls, heated debates in the barracks. They doped the girl? Finally some reins on that freak show. A grizzled sergeant slammed his tray down, grinning. Means the dragons fight predictable now. No more wild cards. But others seethed. A cluster of engineers by the vents muttered, faces gaunt from rad exposure. Cannibalizing our own. What's next? Sedate the kids for target practice? We're no better than the Exir. Morale splintered. fractures running deep. Patrol rotations grew tense with sidelong glares at Mara's handlers. The alliance with the dragons had always been uneasy, humans whispering of leashes on apocalypse. But this confirmed the rot. Survival demanded they devour their humanity, one dose at a time. Zal-Un sensed the discord like a tremor in the weave of fates. From his shadowed nexus aboard the Dominion's vanguard, the Archseer's tendrils extended through the void, reading the probable threads of human frailty. Humans allied with void dragons? An anomaly, but exploitable. Their internal rot was a gift, fear of becoming monsters projected onto their own. He orchestrated the sabotage with surgical precision, phantom probes slipping through sensor nets, lacing supply convoys with micro-explosives tuned to HFY frequencies. The first convoy erupted in silent fire, debris scattering like shattered bone across the approach vectors to the Dragon Bastion. Medships vaporized, food crates breached, the Bastion's stockpiles gutted overnight. Rationing hit like a gut punch. Virkal's energy demands, vast infusions of plasma-grade fuel to sustain his incinerating breath, clashed against the soldiers' needs. Nutrient packs for the starving, anti-rad meds for the burned. Mara poured over the manifests in the ops bay, the air thick with sweat and flickering emergency lights. "Prioritize the dragon," she ordered, voice flat. A medical shipment blinked on the screen, bound for the rad-sick families in the lower decks, chelation drugs and bone regen kits. Essential, but Virkal's next sortie was in 48 hours. Without fuel, he'd falter against the XIR vanguard, and the Bastion would burn. She rerouted it, the dragon's bays filled with the siphoned cargo, his form swelling with renewed fury as techs pumped the lines. But below, the med bays echoed with cries. A medic friend, Elias, burst into ops, his scrubs stained, eyes wild. They'd served together on the front, patching wounds while shells rained. "You bitch!" he snarled, shoving a tablet of denied requisitions under her nose. "Those drugs were for the families, the ones coughing up lungs from the burns you called in. Now they're rationing painkillers while you feed the beast?" Mara didn't flinch, though the words landed like shrapnel. "Elias, the dragon holds the line. One sortie saves thousands. Those families, they'll get what's left." He laughed, bitter and broken. "What's left? You're his priestess now, Mara, sacrificing the weak to appease the god. How long till it's us on the altar?" He stormed out, the door hissing shut like a final breath. In the Bastion's core, Virkal stirred from his recharged trance, the muted bond with Lyra tugging at his ancient instincts. The girl's field hummed faint now, laced with chemical haze, but beneath it, despair seeped through, raw, human, unfiltered. He could taste it, a bitter tang against his scales, like the ash of worlds he'd scorched. Fascination coiled in his massive chest. These frail things, these humans, would torture their own young to keep him leashed. Not out of fear alone, but calculation, ruthless, unyielding. It mirrored his own creed. Strength devours weakness. Yet it unnerved him, this willingness to self-mutilate for power. Admiration warred with an unfamiliar chill. If they could break one of their kind so easily, what chains might they forge for him when the war turned? He rumbled low, wings flexing against the restraints, the bond pulling him toward the girl's distant pain. Mara's boots echoed down the sterile corridor of the command deck, the hum of the station's life support, a distant drone against the knot in her gut. She'd just come from the observation feed, watching Virkal strain against his harnesses, that low rumble vibrating through the bulkheads like a promise of violence. The dragon's unease mirrored her own. Lyra's vitals had spiked earlier, a phantom echo of stress from the girl's latest session with the biofield calibrators. But it was more than that. Intel from the outer pickets had confirmed it. The X-Wire were zeroing in, their probes whispering of targeted strikes. She punched the override for the Admiral's ready room, the door hissing open to reveal K-Tan hunched over a holographic star map, her face etched with the lines of too many lost battles. The Admiral didn't look up, her fingers tracing vectors of incoming enemy signatures. "Admiral!" Mara said, voice steady despite the burn in her chest. The XYR patterns aren't random. They're profiling our assets, specifically Lyra. Their seers have glimpsed her link to Virkal. If they breach, she's the prize they want alive. Kaitan's eyes flicked up, cold and calculating, the kind of gaze that had signed off on orbital glassings without flinching. She'd lost her kin to the first Zir wave, turned that grief into a blade she wielded without mercy. Then we adapt, move the girl to Vault 7, deeper shielding, isolated from the dragon's chamber, and activate the failsafes. Full authorization. If capture probability hits 70%, the restraints detonate. Lethal force. We don't hand them our edge. Mara's jaw tightened, the words landing like shrapnel. Lyra wasn't an edge. She was a kid, barely 20, her empathy the fragile thread holding their alliance to the dragons. Admiral, that's necessary. Lieutenant Ivers. Kay's voice cut like hull plating. You've seen what the Egwire do to leverage points. They twist them until they break. Lyra's value is in containment, not capture. Dismissed. Mara saluted, crisp and mechanical, but inside, revulsion coiled hot. As she strode back through the flickering lights of the engineering bays, her mind raced. Treason. The word tasted like ash, but she'd buried squads under worse justifications. Victory at any cost, that was her creed, forged in the fires of scorched colonies. Yet sacrificing Lyra to her own side, no, not like this. In the dim glow of the restraint maintenance alcove, Mara knelt by the access panel for Lyra's cell. Her multi-tool hummed softly as she bypassed the primary charge, rerouting the explosive cascade to a non-lethal overload. Sparks danced across her fingers, but she didn't flinch. The secondary detonators stayed, enough to maim. Not kill, but the dead man's switch was gutted. If Kay found out, it was a court-martial, or worse. But Lyra's face flashed in her mind, those wide eyes hungry for touch, in a galaxy that offered only war. Alarms shattered the quiet then, red strobes pulsing like arterial blood. The station lurched, gravity wobbling as precision strikes hammered the outer hull. Mara gripped a stanchion, comms exploding in her earpiece. Xwir Vanguard inbound, kinetic lances breaching perimeter, defenses down. From the void, Arch-Seer Zal-Un directed the symphony of ruin, his telepathic web threading through the minds of his swarm. The human's fortress station hung like a bloated insect in the black, its shields flickering under the barrage of singularity-tipped projectiles. He savored the probable futures unfolding, panic in the corridors. The dragon's fury contained just long enough for his bio-weapons to slither through the vents. Engineered horrors, chitinous and venomous, burrowing toward the core where the Black Star slumbered. Zal-Un's philosophy held firm. Terror was the great equalizer, forging order from chaos. These humans, with their fragile alliances, would crumble predictably. The boarding pods latched with wet thuds, disgorging shock troops in iridescent armor, their neural whips crackling. But it was the bioweapons that spread the true fear. Serpentine forms pulsing with acidic ichor, designed to dissolve bulkheads and seek the dragon's psychic signature. Chaos erupted in the lower decks. Mara sprinted toward the containment wing, her pulse rifle slung across her back, dodging sparks from ruptured conduits. The air thickened with smoke and the acrid tang of melting plasteel. Her squad, 8 techs and grunts she'd pulled from the last rotation, huddled in a junction pinned by a collapsing girder. "Lieutenant, help us!" Sergeant Hale's voice cracked over the comm, his face smeared with blood. "The beam's giving. Extract us." Mara skidded to a halt, heart pounding. They were her people, faces she knew from briefings, flaws and all. Hale's cocky grin hiding his fear of the void. But Lyra's cell was 2 decks down, and the failsafes could trigger any second. She met Hale's eyes through the feed. "Hold position. Rescue's en route." "Lyra first," she muttered to herself, overriding the guilt as she sealed the hatch behind her. Their shouts faded, swallowed by the groan of failing structure. What changed? Her choice. Who paid? Them, maybe. But the war demanded it. Deeper in, the security chief, Ramirez, a wiry veteran with trembling hands, stared at his console as the alarms wailed. Xir's signatures closing on the inner sanctum, Lyra's vitals steady, but the protocols burned in his mind. Protect the asset at all costs. His finger hovered over the partial failsafe, sweat beading on his brow. The girl was just a tool, right? Better wounded than in enemy hands. He triggered it. A muffled crack echoed through the vents, followed by Lyra's scream, raw, piercing, like glass in flesh. The charge in her restraints blew low yield, shredding her left arm in a spray of blood and synth flesh bindings. She crumpled in her cell, gasping, the pain shattering the last fragile trust she'd clung to. Humans, her supposed saviors, had just tried to kill her to spite the enemy. Tears mixed with blood on the floor, her mind reeling, abandonment, sharp as the shrapnel in her skin. Mara burst into the wing, rifle barking at a skittering bioweapon that dissolved against the wall in a hiss of acid. "Lyra!" The girl's cell loomed, door warped but intact. Mara slammed the manual override, sparks flying as she tore into the panel. The remaining charges hummed, volatile. Her hands shook, not from fear, but the weight of it all. The squad's ghosts whispered in her ear, but she pushed through, clipping the final leads. The door ground open. Lyra lay there, pale and bleeding, eyes wide with betrayal. They shot me, to stop them getting me." Mara scooped her up, the girl's weight light but slick with blood. "Not all of us, come on." The inner sanctum shook as Xir's shock troops breached the final barrier. Their forms hulking, eyeless helmets scanning with thermal sweeps. Virkal's chamber loomed ahead. The dragon's massive form coiled in the reinforced vault, scales like obsidian catching the emergency lights. He thrashed, the rumble building to a roar that vibrated her bones. The bond pulled at him, Lyra's pain a siren in his ancient mind. Fleets he'd shattered, worlds incinerated, but this human spark, this fragile thing that soothed his fire, now cried out in agony. "Release me!" Virkal's voice boomed, psychic thunder rolling through the air, shaking dust from the ceiling. His wings battered the restraints, eyes, glowing slits of starfire, locked on Mara as she staggered in. Lyra clutched to her chest. "The vermin swarm. Let me end them." Xir troops poured in behind, energy lances humming. Mara's squad remnants fired from cover. But they were falling, screams cut short, keep him contained, and the humans on site died. Her people, what's left of them. Unleash him, and the dragon's rage might consume everything, bond or no. Virkal's gaze bored into her, majestic terror incarnate, wings spanning the chamber like shadowed storms. Awe twisted with dread in her gut. He'd saved their fleets before, but at what cost to his own kind? Her hand hovered over the limiter console. Treason again. But survival wasn't clean. "Live free," she whispered, slamming the release. Restraints shattered like brittle bone, Virkal exploding from his bonds in a whirlwind of claws and fury. The air ignited with his roar, plasma breath scorching the first Xur trooper to ash. He rampaged, indiscriminate. Troops vaporized, human defenders caught in the backwash. Their cries swallowed by the blaze. Scales rippled with power, each sweep of his tail crumpling bulkheads. The physicality of him overwhelming. A cosmic predator. Mara's boots crunched through the ash-choked debris, each step a fire in her lungs. Her arms locked around Lyra's limp form. The girl's weight dragged at her like an anchor, but Mara wouldn't let go. Not yet. The bastion's heart was a slaughter pit, twisted metal girders glowing red, air thick with the reek of charred flesh and ionized blood. Human screams had faded to whimpers, swallowed by the roar of collapsing walls. And there, in the epicenter, Virkal loomed, a colossus of obsidian scales and molten veins, his wings half unfurled like storm sails, casting shadows that devoured the flickering emergency lights. He was ecstasy incarnate, feral and unbound. Claws the size of siege rams raked through a cluster of Xir shock troops, their chitinous armor parting like wet paper, spraying viscous ichor across the deck. A human squad caught in the frenzy fired desperate bursts from their pulse rifles. The rounds sparked harmlessly off his hide, drawing only a savage twist of his maw. Plasma breath gathered in his throat, a building inferno that promised to erase everything in its arc. Prey, wreckage, the fragile line between ally and ash. But then his golden-slit eyes locked on them. Mara staggered to a halt, heart slamming against her ribs. In that gaze, something fractured. The pure kill rage teetered, edged with a flicker of recognition. Lyra. The girl stirred in her arms, a weak murmur escaping her lips, her fingers twitching toward the dragon like a moth to flame. "Virkal!" Mara bellowed, her voice raw from smoke and shouts. "Stand down! She's here! Your anchor, remember? The contract holds!" He didn't hear her, or if he did, it meant nothing. His head swung low, jaws parting in a snarl that vibrated the floor plating, the heat of his breath washing over them like an open furnace door. Lyra's eyes fluttered open, hazy with pain from the wounds that crisscrossed her arms and side, shrapnel from the breach that had nearly claimed her. But there was no fear in her gaze, only that stubborn pull, the same one that had drawn her to him in the holding pens weeks ago. "No," she whispered, her voice a thread. Ignoring Mara's grip, she twisted free, sliding to the deck with a gasp. Her legs buckled immediately, knees grinding into the grit, but she pushed forward anyway, palms scraping over the blood-slick metal. "Lyra, damn it, get back!" Mara lunged, but the girl was already crawling, then stumbling across the killing ground. Zire survivors huddled behind overturned barricades, their multi-lensed eyes wide in alien shock, weapons forgotten. A handful of human troops, faces smeared with soot and terror, froze mid-reload, staring as this fragile thing, barely 20, dressed in a refugee's threadbare jumpsuit, closed the distance to the galaxy's deadliest mercenary. Virkal's foreclaw flexed, talons dripping with the gore of his last kill, poised to sweep her aside like chaff. But Lyra didn't stop. She reached his scale-armored limb, wrapping her arms around it as far as they would go, pressing her cheek to the warm, ridged surface. Her body shook, sobs muffled against him, but she held on. Fingers digging in like roots claiming stone. The dragon froze. A tremor rippled through his massive frame, from the tip of his tail to the spines cresting his skull. In that instant the world inverted for him, not through claws or fire, but through her. Lyra's touch ignited something deeper than biofields or contracts, a psychic surge, raw and unfiltered, flooding his ancient mind. Her pain hit first, sharp as shattered glass. The colony burnings that orphaned her, the isolation of refugee ships, where touch was a luxury hoarded like rations. Then loyalty, fierce and unyielding, the kind that had made her volunteer for this madness, believing one connection could bridge the void between species. And beneath it all, her fear, not of him, but of abandonment, the terror of being left adrift again, a speck in the cosmos's indifference. It poured into Virkal like venom turned elixir, forcing him to relive his own history through her lens. Every world he'd scorched for coin, every fleet reduced to stellar dust, not triumphs of strength, but echoes of loss. The mates he'd outlived in eons of war, the brood scattered to the void, the cold calculus of survival that had hollowed him out, breath by breath. For the first time, the weight of it crushed him, not as glory, but as a chain of endless, aching voids. His roar choked off, throat convulsing. The plasma gathered there, sputtered, redirected not in rage, but restraint. He shifted, vast body curling protectively, one wing folding down to shield her like a living canopy. The easy prey, the XER squad creeping closer, pulse lances charging, went untouched. Instead, his head snapped skyward, eyes locking on the shadow, blotting the fractured viewport, and Xir dreadnought, its hull scarred but descending for the kill. The gout of flame erupted upward, a lance of white-hot annihilation that punched through the void shields like tissue. The ship bloomed into a secondary sun, debris raining in fiery streaks as bulkheads vented atmosphere and crew. Virkal's scales steamed from the effort, but he held his ground. Lyra cradled against him, her breathing ragged but steady. Far beyond the bastion, in the shadowed nexus of the Ixir command frigate, Arch-Seer Zal-Un recoiled from his neural link. The feedback clawed through his mind tendrils, a psychic bruise that no augmetic could filter. He'd felt dragons before, raw dominance, primal fear woven into their fury. But this? A sovereign's will bending not to chains or terror, but to the stubborn affection of a single broken human. It defied his futurescapes, the woven threads of probable agonies. No model accounted for this aberration. Intimacy as weapon, trust as tether. "Severance," he hissed through his vox grill, his elongated form shuddering in its suspension cradle. "All units, disengage. Withdraw to the outer perimeter. This entanglement, it fractures the weave." Alarms wailed as his orders propagated, Zyre forces peeling back from the breach points, their advance crumbling into routed shadows. Across the theater, in the dim-lit war rooms of the human fleet, feeds flickered to life on tactical hollows. Admiral K-Tan leaned forward, her face a mask of controlled shock as the image resolved, the girl clinging to the Black Star's claw, his colossal form pivoting with lethal precision. Zir corvettes shattered under his redirected wrath, escape pods blooming like panicked spores. But the humans, the cowering squads who'd fired on him in blind panic, were spared. He stepped over them, flames licking harmlessly at the deck, his gaze fixed on the retreating enemy. K's second-in-command exhaled sharply. "He's protecting her, and us. By the stars, it's holding." Mara didn't see the feeds. She knelt amid the bodies, knees sinking into the warm slick of blood. Soldiers she'd ordered into the grinder to buy this moment, their faces frozen in final defiance. Her hands trembled as she wiped soot from her brow, staring at Lyra and Virkal. The dragon's eye met hers over the girl's form, not with the old mercenary's calculation, but something deeper, fractured. They'd done it. The first real pushback, a dreadnought lost. Zyre lines buckling. Victory clawed from the jaws of rout, but as the adrenaline ebbed, the cost settled in her gut like lead. She'd forged this bond, weaponized a girl's desperation and a monster's isolation. Lyra's empathy, Virkal's rage, they were intertwined now, a axis humanity couldn't control, only ride. Ethically, it was an abyss justifying the unjustifiable. Strategically, it was salvation or the spark that could burn them all. Mara rose slowly, her voice steady despite the knot in her chest. "It's over, for now." Hours later, as med teams swarmed the bastion and emergency councils patched in from Fleet Command, Verikal's voice rumbled through the private comlink. Mara wore, low and resonant, like thunder echoing in a cavern. Lyra slept in a nearby triage bay, bandaged and sedated, but the dragon's presence lingered vague. His bulk coiled in the cleared hangar beyond. "The sovereigns stir," he said, no preamble, his words carrying the weight of cosmic indifference laced with new wariness. "My kin across the voids, they sense the shift. A human whelp tames the untamable. They watch your kind now, tactician, with eyes that question. Who unleashes the true monsters here?" Mara gripped the comm, staring at the bulkhead as if she could see through to him. The councils droned in her earpiece, debating exploitation, containment, the ethics of chaining affection to war, but his words hung heavier, a mirror to her fears. Survival demanded this intimacy, this trust forged in blood. Yet in wielding it, she wondered if humanity was sharpening its own claws into something unrecognizable. The holographic chamber materialized around her, a sterile dome of flickering blue light aboard the Endurance. Admiral K-Tan's face dominated the central projection, her features etched like weathered alloy, sharp eyes, a scar tracing her jaw from some forgotten skirmish. Flanking her were the council ghosts, fleet tacticians in crisp uniforms, dragon liaison officers with their neural implants glowing faintly, and a cluster of ethicists whose voices always carried that hollow ring of detachment. "We've seen the yields," Kay said, her voice cutting through the static like a laser. Virkal's legions turned the tide at Epsilon Verge. Lyra's bond stabilized him mid-rage, prevented a rout that would have cost us 3 carriers. This isn't anomaly, it's asset. I propose Doctrine 47, formalized empathic interfacing. We'll screen for neuro-responsive profiles, refugees, colonists, anyone with the latent sensitivity, Pair them with lesser drakes first, scale to kings like Virkal. Prototypes right there, the girl and the black star. Mara's stomach twisted. The chamber's air recyclers hummed too loud, masking the pounding in her ears. She leaned forward, her fingers digging into the armrest of her station. Admiral, that's conscription dressed as strategy. Lyra's not a blueprint. She's a survivor who nearly died threading that biofield. You draft more like her, you're not building alliances. You're breeding bait. Kay's gaze hardened, unblinking. Bait that wins wars, Ivers. The Absweer are probing our flanks again. Zal-Un's seers are weaving probabilities. We need every edge. Your program's proven it works. Endorse this, or explain to the Assembly why we're hemorrhaging hulls while dragons sit idle. The Council murmured, projections flickering with data streams, bond success rates, casualty projections, Lyra's vitals from the last engagement spiking like a distress beacon. Mara felt the weight of eyes on her, the invisible chains of command tightening. Her flaw stared back, that ruthless calculus she'd honed on the front lines, sacrificing squads to buy hours. But this? Weaponizing vulnerability on a galactic scale? It reeked of the Exir's own terror orchestrations. No, Mara said, the word dropping like a grenade. I won't sign off on mass pairings. It's a fracture waiting to happen. Dragons don't bond like pets, they claim. One mismatch and you've got a rogue worm torching our own lines. She tapped her console, uploading her counter-proposal in a rush of encrypted files. Instead, we go surgical. Virkal and Lyra as the spearhead. Target Zal-Un's nexus directly, his beacon world in the Veil Nebula. It's the hub of their foresight webs. Hit it hard, blind their seers, and we dictate the endgame. Conventional fleets hold the line elsewhere. Yes, it'll cost more lives short-term, but it's precise. No drafting kids into dragon dens. Silence stretched, broken only by the soft whir of data parsing. Kay's lips thinned. Bold, reckless. You're betting the war on one girl and a monster who could turn on us tomorrow. Better than betting on fragile copies, Mara shot back. This ends it, Admiral, or we drag it out, losing pieces until nothing's left to fight with. The vote cycled through, narrow approval, laced with caveats. Kay logged off first, her projection winking out with a glare that promised repercussions. Mara exhaled, but the relief soured fast. She'd bought time, not mercy. Hours later, in the medbay's dim glow, Mara found Lyra cradled in a suspension field, her body a map of bruises and IV scars. The girl's dark hair fanned across the pillow, eyes half-lidded but sharp as she stirred at the door's hiss. Virkal's absence loomed. He'd retreated to his void dock, nursing wounds that no human medtech could touch. The air smelled of antiseptic and ozone, the faint tang of draconic residue clinging to Lyra's skin. "Mara?" Lyra whispered, voice raw from the sedatives. She pushed up on trembling arms, the field humming in protest. "They told me. The doctrine, more like me. Handlers, bonds. Is it true?" Mara pulled a stool close, the metal cold under her palms. She nodded, throat tight. Kay's pushing it, screening for empathics, starting small, but it'll scale. Lyra's face crumpled, not with tears, but a fierce, cornered anger. "No, I won't let them. I touched him, Mara, felt his fire without burning, but it broke me inside. The agony, the pull. If they force that on others..." She gripped Mara's sleeve, fingers like vices. "Promise me you'll stop it. Protect them or end this. Shut down the alliance. I can't be the reason they chain more souls to monsters." The demand hit like shrapnel. Mara's mind raced. Lyra's impulsive heart, always craving connection, even as it terrified her. To protect meant defying command. To end it meant dooming fleets to SZR lances. Her own ghosts whispered, the squads she'd fed to the grinder, their screams echoing in nightmares. Was this the line? Or just another cost? "I promise," Mara said finally, the words sealing something irrevocable. Lyra's grip loosened, exhaustion claiming her, but the plea lingered like smoke. Back in her quarters, Mara moved like a shadow. The sabotage was simple, surgical. Her handler codes granting access to the secure feeds. She compiled the footage, Lyra's sedation after the bonding surge, convulsions racking her frame, the gashes from Virkal's thrashing claws, held back only by sheer will, the near-death flatline, monitors screaming as the dragon's biofield nearly unraveled her neurons. Unfiltered, raw, no context, just the human toll. With a breath, she broadcast it wide. Civilian nets, assembly channels, even the Dragon Envoy's relays. Outrage ignited like plasma flares, protests on colony hubs, admirals fielding furious queries, K's doctrine shredded in emergency sessions. Monstrous, the headlines screamed, weaponizing our children. By dawn, it was politically toxic, buried under a landslide of no-confidence votes. K's retaliation came swift, an encrypted missive. You're relieved, Ivers. Court-martial pending, but the strike's yours. Fail, and it's treason. Mara stared at the words, the forfeiture sinking in. Career ashes, trust incinerated, safety a relic. But Lyra's demand echoed. This was the price. The Vanguard fleet mobilized under her interim command, a ragged armada of human cruisers escorting Virkal's shadowed form. Lyra rode in the dragon's ventral pod, her presence a tether through the comms. Mara stood on the bridge, void black beyond the viewports, the Veil Nebula swirling like bruised flesh. "Contact in 5, she announced, voice steady despite the knot in her gut. Zalun's beacon world loomed, a crystalline spire piercing the gas clouds, pulsing with seer energies that warped probability itself. Virkal's rumble vibrated the hull, his voice a tectonic growl in her implant. The seer hides in his web, I will burn it. Lyra's soft affirmation followed. We're together. Hold the line. The Exires swarmed, sleek interceptors weaving foresight veils, lances charging to glass the human flanks. Conventional ships buckled hulls, venting crew to the black, the cost Mara had bartered for. She directed fire, tactical overlays dancing across her console, but her eyes locked on the dragon's silhouette. Then the planet-killer lance ignited, a searing beam from the Nexus core, aimed to eviscerate the fleet. Virkal surged, majestic and terrible, wings of void energy unfurling as he interposed. The impact struck like stellar fury, crumpling his armored flank, scales shattering in a cascade of molten debris. His roar shook sensors, agony lancing through the link. Lyra's scream echoed in the comms, but she held, pressing her palm to the pod's interface, her neuro-empathic thread a lifeline through the pain. "Stay with me," she gasped, voice breaking. Virkal twisted, crippled but unrelenting, his breath weapon carving a path to the spire. Mara launched the shuttle, armor-clad and alone, docking amid the chaos. Exire guardians, telepathic drones, swarmed, their mind probes clawing at her thoughts, dredging guilt from the orbital burns. She fought through, pulse rifle barking, blood slicking her visor. The core chamber yawned open, a throbbing heart of crystal and shadow. Zalun's distant presence,